Red Dead Redemption 2 has been released, and this PC right here, we built this for 250 USD, and it just simply failed to boot. The game wouldn't even launch. So that was 1-for-1 with Rockstar. But now we're going to build a higher spec PC in hopes that we can get this game to finally launch. And what we got here is some of the best price performance used money can buy. And that's right, X79 motherboard with a 3930K. Now I picked this up in a used deals hunt for 70 Aussie dollars. And so they didn't know what kind of CPU it had in it. And then they thought the board was just an untested chuck away. So I took a gamble and it paid off extremely well. Then we got a GTX 1070, 300 Aussie dollars. And what I'll do with all this build is, since I did pay Aussie dollars for pretty much everything here, I'll put the USD pricing up on the screen for you guys so you can get a baseline of what I paid. And then we got the MA610P, which is going out on clearance in Australia for 53 Aussie dollars. And this is right, we've got the Snowman right beside that. And you're probably like, why didn't you just use the Snowman? And unfortunately, LGA 2011 is the Snowman's arch enemy. So they don't play nicely, unfortunately. Bye-bye, Snowman. You'll be sorely missed. And I'm just already getting sad just thinking about not using a Snowman when I should be, but it can't be used. And new meta right here, 1 terabyte SSD, 100 Aussie dollars. So I've been talking about the SSDs for a while now and how they just come down in price. And I think if you're building a sort of mid-range PC to higher end, you should just go with an SSD completely due to them being so cheap. And then we've got an AcBell power supply. This thing, we got this for $10 in an untested lot of power supplies, and this one ended up being quite high power. It's got about 650 watts on the 12 volt line. And then behind that, the last component, or the second last, because we got 16 gigabytes of memory, which was 50 Aussie dollars. I was gonna say memory. So yeah, we got 16 gigabytes of memory that we're putting in this. And then there's the Corsair 220T iQ. And this case has got 3 RGB fans at the front. I would have liked it if it had an RGB fan at the back to complete the whole build, but unfortunately they're only including 3, but it's coming in at 147 Aussie dollars. So we're gonna test this case out with sort of like a mid-range build and see if it can handle the heat, because it is tempered glass and it does have these 3 fans. So we're gonna see if it does a decent job of cooling, since it is kind of meshed at the front to allow air to pull through. And of course, we're gonna see what a build like this with 6 cores, 12 threads, and a GTX 1070, what kind of numbers, if Red Dead Redemption 2 finally manages to boot, can put out. Now, if Red Dead Redemption 2 doesn't boot, I am officially getting a refund and I am calling it a day with Rockstar. I'm just gonna be done. That's it. So fingers crossed, everything works out fine, and we can give you guys some epic used plus new price performance.
No! Hey, hey, hey.
So our build is now complete, and there was actually a couple of things that were very difficult with this PC. The first being this graphics card like literally just fits inside this case, and I've dropped it down 2 slots. So this third slot is a PCIe 3.0 Express 16 speed, So just like the top slot, so we're not going to be losing any performance, even though it's going to work absolutely fine on an 8X slot. I guess people get conscious about it and they want it in a 16X slot. So we managed to do that and still give it a little bit of breathing room compared to the CPU cooler, where beforehand it just looked ridiculous. It was like some Tetris thing gone wrong. And then the next thing was the cable management at the back. They've put in a flat-sided panel, so it was extremely difficult to get this power supply, which had all these sloppy cables, extra cables, and we just got it to fit. It was very hard, but managed to do it. The case is sort of bulging out a little bit in the center, but not to worry. So if you do build in this case, you definitely want to make sure that you're not getting a graphics card that's longer than this Duke right here. And you also most likely want to get a modular cable power supply. But other than that, everything's looking pretty good. It's got the ability to mount a radiator, 280mm at the top. And I'd say probably be careful about mounting it at the front if you've got a long graphics card. But other than that, it was a pretty smooth case to build in. And we've got the RGB bling at the front. We've also got the RGB bling on the MA610 cooler. So this thing is looking schmick. And now it's time to figure out what exactly is going on with this message right here. So when I boot it up, it's just giving me an American Megatrends BIOS message, which I'm pretty sure with this board, it either needs a BIOS update or I will have to go into the BIOS manually and just reconfigure it to put on support compatibility module, where that'll enable this old card to work. The problem is if we have to reset the BIOS, however, we're going to run into a lot of problems. And since I do want to overclock this, I'm hoping that I can just get a BIOS update with a native setting on there that does this compatibility support module. Basically, if the BIOS update doesn't fix the problem, every time we overclock, we're going to have to reset the BIOS with the battery. Hopefully, it all goes to plan. And so now here we are with some really good news with this whole config, and that is that our older legacy card enabled us to boot normally and then change an option, which we then flashed the BIOS to the latest F20, which was not within the BIOS itself. We had to manually boot it via this USB stick here and then manually force flash it, and then that ended up updating to the latest BIOS. But the problem that existed on the old BIOS still exists on the new BIOS, and that is you still have to change it to legacy mode within that BIOS in order to get our GTX 1070 working. But what I'm doing now is, before I change this GPU over, is I'm overclocking and just making sure I've got a stable overclock in before I put this graphics card back in. Because the reason for that is, if I put this GPU back in and we've got instability and the BIOS needs to be reset, then I'm going to have to take this graphics card out once again and then do everything again. And so it just really creates an extra chain in the process. And you may be thinking, how do I know all this stuff? I've actually had experience in the past with this exact motherboard, so I know exactly what to look out for. So I've already pulled my hair out in the past, gone bald, and then my hair's grown back, and this time it's grown back thicker, and I'm able to get the job done with ease. So what we're gonna do is let this run till a good 10 minutes, check the temperatures, which they already are looking like they're absolutely fine with this MA610. We've got a nice and juicy 4.5 gigahertz all-core overclock, and we've got our memory up to 1866, which, keep in mind, this is only generic DDR3 memory. So if it passes the stress test, everything's running fine, then we will finally be able to install Red Dead Redemption 2 and also another couple of games, and then I'll leave all them installing overnight. And then hopefully this game finally boots and we can see if this used PC, this $500 US or 730 Aussie dollar rig, can run R2RDT2. That's Red Dead Redemption 2. seems like lately I've been losing my composure around here, and it's probably because of builds like this one here today. This FPS was phenomenally good. Now, keep in mind, we did only test 3 games, but we tested the new Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1080p settings. And now, there is so many settings there to go through, but basically in a nutshell, if you want this game to look good and play smoothly, especially on mid-range computers like I built here today, all you gotta do is put the textures up and put everything else either to low or medium. NVIDIA GPUs do well at tessellation, so you can leave that setting on high, and then you should be having happy days. I noticed that it was really smooth with this Vulkan API, and I did run the inbuilt benchmark, in which I thought the benchmark in GTA 5, it wasn't that realistic, and that I think it spent most of the time just flying around, whereas opposed to when I was playing GTA 5, I spent most of my time doing the missions or driving cars and having fun on the streets. This one in Red Dead 2 actually is a bit of everything that I'd find realistic, in that you're indoors, you're outdoors, you're in a race, you're in battles, and whatnot. So it's actually a good benchmark where you can see the FPS I've got, run the benchmarks for yourselves and see if your computers are stacking up against mine in terms of settings, but also performance. The one thing about that inbuilt benchmark is it is hard to get any overlay FPS counters on it because it does have the cutscenes. And so what I did here was I used the average FPS from the benchmark itself and then used the 0.1% lows and 1% lows from the actual reader. And what we got here was a really smooth FPS on Red Dead 2 in Vulkan API. And I have tested this only like today, literally, so it may have had a few performance update tweaks which have made it run a lot smoother. But for what it's worth, it was running really well on this computer. Even though 78 FPS at 1080p isn't a lot to get excited about, it is enough to enjoy the visual fidelity and also have a pretty smooth experience while you enjoy the storyline of this game. But anyway, moving on to the other 2 titles that I'm playing a lot personally. Fortnite, we had Chapter 2 here, Epic settings, I decided to test Epic, and then the original high settings that I've been using in a lot of the other budget builds that I've been doing here on the channel. And we had 125 FPS average on Epic settings, 69 and 37 1.1% lows. Then high settings was like around 237 FPS, 141% and 29.1% low. And the funny thing is about this 237 average FPS number, it's right around that 240 Hertz. So if you had this configuration and you wanted to play Fortnite at 1080p on a 240 Hertz monitor, this would definitely be a sweet spot in terms of a rig that could get up and handle this game absolutely no problems. And then the last test we had was Dota 2, max settings 1080p. It was 143 average FPS, 73 and 51%, 1% and 0.1% lows. So I'm really sort of impressed by what this older gear can do. I mean, the GTX 1070, not so old, but the 3930K and this combination of even just dual channel memory and it clocked to 4.5 gigahertz is really good. The temperatures on the CPU and also the GPU were running really well inside the 220T case. Now I came into this build thinking that this case would be one of those ones that didn't offer a whole lot, but I was really impressed by the airflow and how Corsair have implemented the 220T. The aesthetics, that's up in the air, whether you like that front grille or not, doesn't really matter because you can just take it off if you want. And then all the filters are so easy to take off. Everything from start to finish building inside this case was pretty smooth, except the rear of the case for the cable management. I did have a hard time with the non-modular power supply that I used, which had so many cables, and it just really didn't go well with this case. In terms of me really having to lay a tech smackdown to get that rear side panel on. So if you're gonna get the 220T, I'd definitely get a power supply with less cables, or of course a modular design where then you can take away the cables that you don't need. But other than that, those 3 fans at the front that they've included, they do a great job of giving out bling, but also the airflow for the noise is impressive, where we saw with the temperatures here with the side panel on versus off, we actually managed to score 1 degree less, which means that it's a pretty well designed case with good airflow to boot. So at 147 Aussie, and in the US, I believe you get around 100 US, it is a case worth considering if you want something with good build quality and good airflow. And speaking of the overclocks and the temperatures, the CPU was hovering around 60 degrees, even in all these titles that we were playing. The GTX 1070 Duke, after some tech loving, that was sitting comfortably most of the time around low 60s, sometimes under. So all the temperatures, all the noise, well controlled in this build. And that's about it for today's build. If you guys enjoyed this 500 USD price tag build where we added a bit of new in with, of course, some really good used deals that we got, I thought that cooler for this CPU was kind of necessary. It is a big cooler and I don't have anything else around here in terms of what I could use. The Snowman, unfortunately, does not fit, as we said before, this motherboard, and that it doesn't support LGA 2011, which I wish they did release a version that supported 2011, because I know the Snowman could handle the 3930K absolutely fine. And then of course that GTX 1070 Duke just fitting within the case, which was, I guess it's a limitation, but it's not really, because the GPU is getting really good airflow in this case, the 220T. But if you did want to get this case, make sure you budget for that length of the GPU, which I'll quickly put on the screen here for you guys if you're considering getting this case, where the Duke just, and I mean just, fit inside this case. But other than that, all the parts check out, and do let us know in the comments section below if you like the balance of the 220T, which is a new case, and also that new cooler in relation to matching up with some of these used parts. I thought the motherboard, CPU, and of course the RAM combo did extremely well in games. Then we got that used 1070 Duke, which we gave some tech yes loving to. And then we had the Akbel power supply, which I've used one of these in the past, and they've done okay. I mean, the overclocks here that we got today does say that the power supply, I guess, is okay. It's also got a blue LED at the back and a switch for it if you want to turn your LED bling on and off, which I guess accounts for a lot in today's day and age of gaming PC. Though, that aside, we've got the question of the day here, which comes from YouTube is a meme, and he says 150 FPS epic settings on Fortnite. I need to test other games like RSS or COD. And the reason I benchmark Fortnite is quite simply because it's one of the most, I think it is the most popular game on PC at the moment. It's what most people are playing. And when it comes to selling a PC, I'm gonna tell you, everyone asks, like if they're gonna ask how much FPS can this PC get, it's pretty much to do with Fortnite. I never get asked how much FPS does it get in RSS. I never get asked how much FPS it does get in COD. Well, once in a blue moon compared to Fortnite. So Fortnite is dominating in terms of PC sales, where people want to get onto PC to play Fortnite because their mates are playing on mouse and keyboard and they probably dominate them when they're on the console. And it's a game to benchmark to show that people usually want 120 FPS and higher, and if their PC can get that, then they're going to be happy. And I've had messages from people saying that their old laptops can only get like 15 FPS in this game, and then they see some of the budget builds I do on the channel here, and they're like, wow, the performance is really good for the price. And that's what it's all about. So putting that in as sort of like a staple is a good thing to help people usher in the new wave of PC gamers, where I'd much rather them on PC games than on console games, because I'm a PC gamer and I want more innovation in the gaming space on PC. Hopefully that answers that question, but I will ask you guys what games are the most games you want to see benchmarked here on the channel in terms of GPU performance and CPU performance. I wouldn't mind getting a new updated catalog of games that I have to test for you guys. That'd be great, because at the end of the day, Tech Yes City exists because of you guys, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, then be sure to hit that like button, and also I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. And if you've watched till this far and you're enjoying the content, you're not subbed, may wish to hit that sub button, ring the bell, and I will catch you in another tech video very soon. And also don't forget to let us know in the comment section below, do you mix new and used parts together? I'm finding myself doing it a lot lately, especially when it comes to flipping PCs, and also just getting a good aesthetic out of that PC for a final flip. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. Catch you in the next one. Peace out for now. Bye.